The year was 1986. Their daughter, Amelia Rose Callahan, a bright, freckle-faced 12-year-old with a cascade of auburn hair and eyes the color of a summer sky, vanished. She'd been roller skating, a blur of pink and teal on her way to her best friend Chloe's house, just a few familiar blocks away. The skates, a birthday present Michael had painstakingly chosen, were her prized possession. He'd even etched her initials, ARC, onto the worn leather strap of the right skate, a small, personal touch. They hadn't realized anything was wrong until Chloe's mother called, hours later, asking why Amelia hadn't arrived. The casual inquiry sliced through the afternoon calm like a shard of ice. Panic, cold and sharp, had bloomed in Michael's chest, spreading through his veins, a feeling that had, in many ways, never truly receded. The subsequent days blurred into a frantic, desperate search. Police, volunteers, neighbors, everyone in Havenwood scoured every street, every park, every wooded trail. Flyers with Amelia's smiling face papered the town, her image becoming a haunting reminder of their stolen joy. But Amelia, and her distinctive pink and teal roller skates, had disappeared as if swallowed by the earth itself. 20 years. 2 decades of hollow anniversaries, birthdays marked by a suffocating silence, and the relentless, gnawing question of what if. Michael Callahan was a man hollowed out by grief. The vibrant, optimistic architect had slowly been replaced by a shadow, his laughter a distant memory, his eyes perpetually clouded with a sorrow that time refused to erode. Their home in Havenwood, once filled with Amelia's chatter and the clatter of her skates on the driveway, had become a mausoleum of memories. Her room remained untouched, a shrine to a childhood frozen in time. Now, in 2006, they were in Whisperwind Bluffs, Washington, a picturesque coastal town known for its rugged cliffs and whispering pines. The trip had been Sarah's idea. "A change of scenery, Michael," she'd urged, her voice gentle but firm. "We need to breathe, to find some peace away from everything." He knew she meant away from the constant reminders in Havenwood, away from the oppressive weight of their shared loss. He'd agreed, more out of a sense of weary obligation to her than any real hope for respite. Peace felt like a foreign concept, a luxury he no longer deserved. They wandered through a bustling local market, the air thick with the scent of saltwater, fried dough, and pine needles. Sarah tried to engage him, pointing out local crafts, her expression carefully optimistic. Michael offered monosyllabic responses, his gaze distant, his thoughts, as always, circling back to Amelia. He felt a familiar pang of guilt. Sarah had tried so hard to rebuild a semblance of life around the gaping hole Amelia's absence had left. She'd found solace in her gardening, in her book club, in quiet friendships. He, on the other hand, had walled himself in. His grief, a fortress no one could penetrate. "Look, Michael, that old bookstore looks charming," Sarah said, gesturing towards a quaint, ivy-covered building. He merely nodded. She sighed, a small, almost inaudible sound, but it resonated with years of quiet frustration. "I know this is hard," she said softly, her hand finding his. "But Amelia would want us to live, Michael, not just exist." He pulled his hand away, not unkindly, but the gesture spoke volumes. "Don't, Sarah, please." The raw ache in his voice silenced her. How could he live when he didn't even know if his daughter was alive or dead? The uncertainty was a torture more profound than any definitive news could have been. Every blonde-haired girl glimpsed from a distance, every peal of childish laughter, was a fresh stab of pain, a cruel reminder of what he'd lost. He often wondered if Sarah resented him for his inability to move on. She never said so, but he saw it in the flicker of sadness in her eyes when he retreated into himself, in the way she sometimes looked at him as if he were a fragile object on the verge of shattering. He knew he was a burden, a constant reminder of their shared tragedy. But the thought of forgetting Amelia, even for a moment, of diluting the purity of his grief, felt like a betrayal. As they walked, his eyes, dulled by years of unshed tears, scanned the storefronts without really seeing them. He was an observer, detached from the vibrant tapestry of life around him. The laughter of families, the chatter of tourists, the general hum of a town enjoying a summer weekend. It all seemed to belong to a different world, a world he no longer inhabited. He was a ghost haunting his own life, forever tethered to that sunny June afternoon in 1986 when the world had tilted on its axis and never quite righted itself. Sarah, bless her resilient heart, was trying to pull them both back from the brink, but he was an anchor, dragging them down into the depths of his despair. This trip, he knew, was her desperate attempt to salvage something, anything, from the wreckage of their lives. He wished he could give her what she wanted, what she deserved. But the ghost of Amelia Rose Callahan, with her bright smile and her pink and teal roller skates, held him too tightly in her spectral grasp. The afternoon sun cast long shadows as Michael and Sarah continued their reluctant stroll through Whisperwind Bluffs. Sarah, ever hopeful, pointed towards a cluttered antique shop tucked between a bakery and a nautical supply store. "The Collector's Nook," read the faded sign swinging creakily in the sea breeze. "Let's just pop in for a minute, Michael. You never know what treasures you might find." Michael grunted non-committally. "You go ahead, I'll wait out here." The thought of sifting through other people's discarded memories held no appeal. He preferred to be alone with his own. He leaned against the brick wall, arms crossed, watching the ebb and flow of tourists. Sarah gave him a small, understanding smile and disappeared inside. He closed his eyes for a moment, the familiar ache settling in his chest. 20 years. It felt like yesterday, and an eternity, all at once. He could still see Amelia's excited face as she unwrapped the roller skates on her 12th birthday, her joyous shriek, the way she'd immediately strapped them on and wobbled precariously down the hallway, laughing. Pink and teal, her favorite colors. He'd spent weeks searching for the perfect pair. His eyes drifted to the shop's dusty window display. It was a chaotic assortment of forgotten objects. Tarnished silver, chipped porcelain dolls with vacant stares, old maritime maps, a collection of sea glass in a murky jar. And then, tucked in a corner, half hidden behind a stack of yellowed books, he saw them. A pair of roller skates, children's size, pink and teal. Michael's breath hitched. His heart, a sluggish drum for so long, suddenly hammered against his ribs. It couldn't be. It was a coincidence, a cruel, taunting coincidence. Roller skates like that were common enough, weren't they? Especially from that era. He tried to dismiss it, to turn away, but his feet felt rooted to the spot. His gaze was locked on them. He moved closer, pressing his face against the cool glass, his breath fogging a small patch. The light was dim, but the colors were unmistakable. The scuffed pink boots, the faded teal laces, the slightly rusted wheels. They were old, well used, just like Amelia's would be. His mind reeled. No, it was impossible. Whisperwind Bluffs was hundreds of miles from Havenwood, Colorado. How could they possibly be here? But a dreadful, insistent certainty began to dawn. He remembered the way one of the teal laces on Amelia's left skate had been slightly frayed near the top eyelet. He strained to see. Yes, there it was. A tiny, familiar imperfection. His blood ran cold. He stumbled back from the window, a strangled sound escaping his lips. He had to be sure. He had to see the initials. Without a second thought, he burst through the shop door, the bell above it jangling violently. Sarah, who was examining a collection of antique brooches, looked up in surprise. "Michael? What on earth?" He ignored her, his eyes scanning the dimly lit interior, searching for the window display. He spotted the skates. "Those roller skates," he croaked, his voice hoarse, pointing a trembling finger. "In the window. I need to see them." The proprietor, a stout woman with tightly permed gray hair and spectacles perched on her nose, looked up from her ledger, startled by his abrupt entrance. "Well, certainly, sir, but please, no need to shout." "Please," Michael repeated, the word a raw plea. "The pink and teal ones." Sarah, sensing the sudden, desperate urgency in her husband, hurried to his side. "Michael, what is it?" The proprietor, grumbling slightly, retrieved the skates from the window. As she placed them on the counter, Michael lunged forward, his hands shaking so violently he could barely grasp them. Sarah gasped, her eyes widening as she too recognized the familiar colors, the specific style. "Oh my God," she whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. Michael turned the right skate over, his fingers fumbling with the worn leather strap near the heel. His heart pounded in his ears, a deafening roar that drowned out the proprietor's curious murmurs. And then he saw it. Faded, almost invisible against the aged leather, but undeniably there. 3 small hand-carved letters. A.R.C. Amelia Rose Callaghan. The world tilted. The air rushed from his lungs. He swayed, gripping the counter for support. It was them. After 20 years, against all odds, against all logic, here they were. Amelia's roller skates. His daughter's roller skates. The ones he had etched himself. "It's them, Sarah," he choked out, his voice thick with a storm of emotions, disbelief, shock, a terrifying nascent hope, and an overwhelming soul-crushing grief. "They're Amelia's." Sarah stared at the initials, her face pale. Tears welled in her eyes. "It can't be. After all this time. How?" The proprietor, sensing something far more significant than a simple purchase was unfolding, looked from Michael's anguished face to Sarah's tear-streaked one. "Are you all right, folks? Is there something special about these skates?" Michael couldn't speak. He could only stare at the tangible piece of his lost daughter, this impossible relic from a buried past, now resurrected in a dusty antique shop hundreds of miles from home. The skates were a key, a clue, a scream from the past. But what door did they unlock, and what lay behind it? "They belong to our daughter," Sarah managed to say, her voice trembling. "Our daughter who disappeared 20 years ago." The weight of those 20 years, the endless searching, the fading hope, all crashed down on Michael. He clutched the skates to his chest as if they were Amelia herself, a fragile lifeline in a turbulent sea of pain and confusion. The pink and teal colors, once symbols of joy, now seemed to mock him with their silent testimony to a long-lost childhood. This wasn't just a pair of skates. It was a ghost. And it had just whispered his daughter's name. The antique shop proprietor, Mrs. Henderson, looked bewildered, her earlier annoyance replaced by a cautious sympathy. "Disappeared? Oh, you poor dears. That's dreadful." She peered at the skates. "I bought these at an estate sale a few months back, up in Port Townsend, part of a larger lot. Didn't think much of them. Just a bit of vintage nostalgia." Michael barely heard her. His mind was a maelstrom. "Amelia's skates. Here. How?" "We need these skates," he stated, his voice raspy but firm. Mrs. Henderson hesitated. "Well, they're for sale, of course. $15. $15? Michael stared at her, incredulous. "These were stolen. They belong to our missing child. We're not buying them back." "Now hold on," Mrs. Henderson said, her tone hardening slightly. "I bought them in good faith. I have expenses. I can't just give them away." Sarah, ever the pragmatist even through her tears, intervened. "Please understand, these are evidence. They could help us find out what happened to our daughter." The argument was escalating when the bell above the door jangled again. A uniformed police officer stepped inside, his gaze sweeping the shop. "Everything all right in here?" Heard some raised voices. "Officer, thank God," Michael said, relief flooding him. He quickly explained the situation, his voice cracking with emotion as he recounted Amelia's disappearance and the impossible discovery of her skates, pointing to the ARC initials. "This is proof. These are hers." Officer Miller, a young man with a serious expression, listened patiently. He examined the skates, his eyes lingering on the initials. "Do you have any documentation? A missing persons report?" "Yes, of course," Sarah said, already fumbling in her purse for her wallet. She always carried a worn, folded copy of the original Havenwood Police Department flyer, its edges soft from years of handling. It contained Amelia's photo, her description, and the date she went missing. The 15th of June, 1986. Officer Miller took the flyer, comparing the details with the skates. He then used his radio to call into the station, requesting a check on a 20-year-old missing person case from Havenwood, Colorado, involving Amelia Rose Callaghan. The crackle of the radio filled the tense silence of the shop. After a few minutes, the dispatcher confirmed, an active, unsolved case matching the details. "All right, Mr. and Mrs. Callaghan," Officer Miller said, his tone now more formal. "These skates will need to be taken as evidence. Mrs. Henderson, I understand your position, but given the circumstances, these are now part of an active police investigation." He carefully placed the skates into an evidence bag. "I'll need you both to come down to the station to give a formal statement." He then turned to Mrs. Henderson. "Ma'am, I'll also need the name of the person or estate from whom you purchased these skates." Mrs. Henderson, flustered but cooperative now that officialdom was involved, provided the details she could recall about the estate sale. The ride to the Whisperwind Bluffs police station was a blur for Michael. He sat in the back of the patrol car, Sarah beside him, her hand gripping his tightly. His mind raced. The skates were a tangible link, the first in 20 agonizing years. But what did it mean? Were they discarded carelessly, or was there a more sinister connection to this town? At the station, they were led to a small, sterile interview room. They recounted the story of Amelia's disappearance again, the details etched into their souls. They described Amelia at 12. Her reddish-brown hair that she always wore in a ponytail, her bright green-blue eyes, the small, crescent-shaped scar above her left eyebrow from a tumble out of a tree. The date, the 15th of June, 1986, a date forever seared into their memories. After their initial statements, they were introduced to Detective Harding, a seasoned officer with tired eyes and a compassionate demeanor. He had already been briefed by Officer Miller and had pulled up the digitized files from the Havenwood PD. "Mr. and Mrs. Callahan," Detective Harding began, his voice gentle, "I can only imagine what you're going through. To have a piece of your daughter surface like this after so long, it's extraordinary. And I'm sure, incredibly painful." Michael just nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. Sarah recounted their fruitless 20-year search, the private investigators, the psychics, the endless dead ends that had chipped away at their hope, piece by piece. The proprietor of the collector's nook, Mrs. Henderson, said she acquired the skates from an estate sale. Harding continued, consulting his notes. The sale was for a man named Silas Blackwood. He apparently bought the collector's nook about 18 years ago. He moved to Whisperwind Bluffs around that time. Before that, his history is a bit vague. Seems he was a long-haul trucker for a period. Silas Blackwood. The name meant nothing to Michael. He tried to picture him, this man who had, however indirectly, possessed a piece of Amelia. Harding showed them a grainy DMV photo of Blackwood, a man with dark, receding hair, sharp features, and cold eyes. Neither Michael nor Sarah recognized him. Mrs. Henderson mentioned that Blackwood often acquired items for his shop from various sources during his travels, even before he settled here permanently, Harding added. She only started working for him about 10 years ago, after his wife passed away. She said Blackwood himself is currently out of town, expected back in a couple of days. Out of town. Another delay. Another dead end? Or a crucial piece of the puzzle? "What we know is this," Harding summarized. "Your daughter's skates, positively identified by you, ended up in the possession of Silas Blackwood, who bought this shop 18 years ago, roughly 2 years after Amelia went missing. He was a trucker around the time of her disappearance. This is a significant lead, perhaps the first real one in 2 decades. We'll need to speak with Miss Blackwood as soon as he returns. We'll also process the skates for any latent prints or DNA, though after 20 years and multiple handlers, it's a long shot." Michael felt a flicker, not of hope, but of something akin to grim determination. For 20 years, they'd had nothing. Now they had a name, a place, a tangible object. It was a slender thread, but it was a thread nonetheless. As they left the station, the late afternoon sun was beginning to dip towards the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Michael felt a sliver of purpose return to his hollowed-out existence. He didn't know where this path would lead, but he knew, with absolute certainty, that he had to follow it. The skates were a message from the past, and he was finally ready to listen. Sleep was an elusive phantom that night. Michael and Sarah lay in the unfamiliar bed of their Airbnb, the silence of Whisperwind Bluffs punctuated only by the distant moan of a foghorn and the restless creaking of the old house. Every time Michael closed his eyes, he saw the pink and teal skates, the faded initials, ARC. Hope, a dangerous and unfamiliar sensation, warred with a deep-seated dread. The next morning, after a fitful night, an unspoken agreement passed between them. They had to go back to the collector's nook. The police had told them to wait, that they would contact Silas Blackwood upon his return, but waiting felt impossible. They needed to see the place again, to absorb any detail they might have missed, to simply be near the last place Amelia's skates had rested before their discovery. They arrived at the shop mid-morning. It was closed, a closed for inventory sign propped in the window. Disappointment washed over Michael. He felt a surge of frustration. They were so close to something. As they were about to turn away, Michael noticed movement at a side alley that ran alongside the shop. A narrow door, previously unseen, opened, and the clerk from yesterday, Mrs. Henderson, emerged, locking it behind her. She looked flustered. Just then, a dark sedan pulled away from the curb further down the alley. Michael caught a glimpse of the driver, a man with dark, receding hair, sharp features. It was the man from the DMV photo, Silas Blackwood. And in the passenger seat, another man, burly and grim-faced. Between them, in the back, Michael saw a flash of something small. A child? A young girl, her face pale, her eyes wide and frightened. "That was him!" Michael exclaimed, his voice low and urgent. "Blackwood! He's supposed to be out of town!" Sarah looked shaken. "And there was a child with him, Michael, a little girl. She looked scared." They hurried towards Mrs. Henderson, who jumped when she saw them. "Mr. and Mrs. Callahan, what are you doing here? The shop is closed." "We just saw Silas Blackwood," Michael said, his tone accusatory. "You said he was out of town. And who was that little girl with him?" Mrs. Henderson wrung her hands. "Oh, that wasn't Mr. Blackwood. That was his brother Vincent. He sometimes helps out. And the little girl, that's his niece, Lily. They were just running an errand." Her explanation was rushed, her eyes darting nervously. Michael didn't believe her for a second. The resemblance to the photo was too strong, and the fear in the girl's eyes, his brother? He looked exactly like the photo Detective Harding showed us of Silas Blackwood. "A strong family resemblance, that's all," Mrs. Henderson insisted, but her voice lacked conviction. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have things to do." She practically fled, leaving Michael and Sarah standing on the sidewalk, a cold knot of suspicion tightening in Michael's stomach. Blackwood was here. He was lying about his whereabouts, and he had a terrified child with him. The skates were no longer just a relic of the past. They felt like a warning about the present. They immediately called Detective Harding, relaying what they'd seen. Harding sounded concerned. "His brother, Vincent. I have no record of Vincent Blackwood. And he's definitely not due back until tomorrow, according to Mrs. Henderson. This is troubling. Stay away from the shop, Mr. and Mrs. Callahan. Let us handle this." Easier said than done. The image of the frightened girl, Lily, haunted Michael. Was she in danger? Was her situation somehow connected to Amelia's skates being in Blackwood's possession? The questions multiplied, each one more disturbing than the last. Later that evening, Michael couldn't settle. Sarah was on the phone, speaking in hushed tones to her sister, finding solace in a familiar voice. Michael stepped out onto the small porch of their Airbnb, needing air, needing to think. The sea breeze was cool, carrying the scent of salt and damp earth. "Mister?" The small voice startled him. He looked down to see a young girl, perhaps 10 or 11 years old, standing at the foot of the porch steps. She was thin, with large dark eyes that held a desperate, hunted look. Her clothes were clean but worn, and she clutched a tattered backpack to her chest. "Hello," Michael said gently, not wanting to frighten her. "Can I help you?" The girl took a hesitant step closer. Are you the man who was asking about the old skates at the collector's nook?" Michael's heart quickened. "Yes, I am. How did you know?" "I saw you," she whispered, glancing around nervously, as if expecting someone to appear from the shadows. "And I heard Mrs. Henderson talking about you, about your daughter." She paused, then the words tumbled out in a rush. "Please, mister, you have to help me. You have to help Lily." "Lily?" Michael knelt to her level. "Is that the little girl who was with the man in the dark car today? The man with the hat?" He'd noticed Blackwood, or the man he presumed to be Blackwood, had been wearing a fedora, obscuring his face somewhat. The girl nodded vigorously. "Yes, that's Mr. Blackwood. He took her. He took my sister." "Your sister?" Michael's mind raced. "Who are you?" "My name is Maya," she said, her voice trembling. "Lily is my younger sister. We were at the St. Agnes home, the orphanage in Port Townsend. Mr. Blackwood, he came a few weeks ago. He said he wanted to adopt a little girl. He chose Lily. But it wasn't right, mister. He seemed mean. And Lily was so scared. They took her away yesterday. I ran away from home this morning. I followed them. I saw them go to that shop, and then I saw them leave with Lily. She looked terrified." Michael showed Maya the photo of Silas Blackwood on his phone, the one Detective Harding had shown him. "Is this the man, Maya? The man who took Lily?" Maya recoiled slightly. "Yes, that's him. That's Mr. Blackwood. He sometimes wears a hat, sometimes not." A chilling realization washed over Michael. Mrs. Henderson had lied. Blackwood was in town, and he had taken this child, Lily. "Maya," he said, his voice urgent, "do you know where he took Lily?" Maya nodded, tears welling in her eyes. I think so. I saw his car. It was an old, dark sedan, and he has a beat-up RV. He sometimes parks it at the old Fisherman's Rest campground, just out of town. He might have taken her there. Please, mister, you have to save her. He's a bad man." Michael's blood ran cold. A man who collected things, who had kept his daughter's skates for years, who now had another little girl. The implications were horrifying. He looked at Maya's desperate face, her fear a mirror of the terror he imagined Lily must be feeling, the same terror Amelia must have felt 20 years ago. He couldn't stand by. He wouldn't. "Okay, Maya," he said, his voice firm with a resolve he hadn't felt in years. "Okay, we'll find your sister." He quickly sent a text to Sarah. "Urgent. Have a lead. We'll explain. Stay put. Call Harding if you don't hear from me in an hour." Then he turned to Maya. "Show me the way." Michael's old sedan rumbled along the coastal highway, Maya beside him, her small finger pointing the way. The Fisherman's Rest campground was, as its name suggested, a dilapidated collection of weather-beaten cabins and uneven RV spots, mostly deserted at this time of year. It sat precariously on a bluff overlooking a churning gray sea. A sense of unease settled over Michael. This was a place where someone could easily disappear. "That's it," Maya whispered, pointing to a grimy, dented RV, tucked away in the most secluded corner of the lot, partially hidden by overgrown rhododendrons. "That's Mr. Blackwood's RV." Michael parked his car a discreet distance away, his heart pounding. "Stay here, Maya. Lock the doors. If I'm not back in 10 minutes, or if you see any trouble, run to that main office and get help." He didn't want to involve the child further, but he also couldn't leave her alone in the car without a plan. Maya nodded, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and hope. Michael approached the RV cautiously, his footsteps crunching on the gravel. The curtains were drawn, but he could hear a low murmur from within. A television, perhaps. He knocked on the door. Silence. He knocked again, louder this time. "Mr. Blackwood?" The door creaked open a few inches, and a large, unkempt man with a grizzled beard and cold, watchful eyes peered out. This wasn't Blackwood. This was the other man Michael had seen in the car. "What do you want?" the man grunted, his voice like gravel. "I'm looking for Silas Blackwood," Michael said, trying to keep his voice steady. "And a little girl named Lily. Is she here?" The man, who Michael mentally dubbed Grizz, snorted. "Blackwood ain't here. And Lily? Yeah, she's here. She's fine. Mr. Blackwood legally adopted her. Now, beat it." "You're trespassing." Just then, Michael heard it. A faint sound from inside the RV, a child's whimper, quickly stifled. His blood ran cold. "I want to see her," Michael insisted, his hand instinctively moving towards his pocket, where his phone rested. "I want to make sure she's okay." Grizz's eyes narrowed. "You ain't seeing nobody. Get lost before I make you." He started to close the door. Michael put his foot in the opening. "I'm not leaving until I see that girl." A surge of adrenaline, born of paternal rage and long-suppressed grief, coursed through him. This man, Blackwood, they were cut from the same cloth as whatever monster had taken Amelia. Grizz shoved the door hard, and Michael stumbled back. The door slammed shut, the lock clicking into place. Michael hammered on it. "Let me see her. I know she's in there." He heard shuffling inside, then the roar of an engine. The RV lurched forward, kicking up gravel and dust. It swung out of its spot and careened towards the campground exit. Michael sprinted back to his car. "They're leaving!" he yelled as he jumped in. Maya was pale, but resolute. He threw the car into gear, tires spinning, and sped after the RV. As they reached the main road, the RV swerved dangerously, then accelerated, heading north along the winding coastal highway. Michael struggled to keep pace. The RV was surprisingly fast for its bulk. "He's lying, mister," Maya cried out, clutching her seatbelt. "Lily wouldn't want to be with him. He scares her." As they rounded a sharp bend, Michael caught a glimpse through the RV's grimy rear window. Grizz was driving, and in the passenger seat, his heart leaped. A woman. Her profile was turned away, but he saw a cascade of reddish-brown hair catching the fleeting sunlight. It was the same color as Amelia's. The same color as the woman he'd briefly seen in Blackwood's car earlier that day. The woman he hadn't registered properly in his haste and focus on the child. A wave of dizziness washed over him. Could it be? After all these years? No, it was impossible. A trick of the light, a desperate father's wishful thinking. He shook his head, trying to clear it. Focus on Lily, he told himself. Focus on the child you can save. He fumbled for his phone, trying to dial 911, then Detective Harding, but the signal was weak, cutting in and out along this remote stretch of coast. Damn it! He slammed the phone down. The RV suddenly veered off the main highway onto a narrow, unpaved logging road, disappearing into the dense forest that blanketed the coastal mountains. Michael didn't hesitate. He followed, his sedan bumping and jarring over the rough terrain. Branches scraped against the car, the canopy of trees plunging them into a premature twilight. For what felt like an eternity, they bounced along the rutted track, deeper and deeper into the wilderness. Michael's mind was a frantic whirl. The woman in the RV. Was it just a coincidence? Or was this a nightmare scenario far more complex and horrifying than he could have ever imagined? The possibility, however remote, that Amelia might be connected to this, that she might be alive and somehow entangled with these people, was both exhilarating and terrifying. Finally, the logging road opened into a clearing. Ahead, nestled amongst towering pines, stood a large, ramshackle two-story house, its paint peeling, its windows dark and unwelcoming. It looked like something out of a horror film. The RV was parked haphazardly beside it. This had to be Blackwood's sanctuary, his hidden lair. Michael pulled his car to a stop at the edge of the clearing, hidden by a thicket of trees. He cut the engine. The silence of the forest pressed in, broken only by the chirping of unseen insects and the frantic beating of his own heart. He had found them. Now what? Michael killed the engine, and an oppressive silence descended, broken only by the chirping of crickets and Maya's ragged breathing beside him. From their concealed position at the edge of the dense woods, they watched the remote house. It was larger than he'd anticipated, with a sprawling, neglected garden and a wraparound porch that sagged in places. It exudes an aura of decay and isolation. The RV door creaked open. Grizz emerged first, stretching and scanning the perimeter with a wary gaze. Then, the passenger door opened, and the woman with the reddish-brown hair stepped out. She moved with a strange, almost hesitant grace, her shoulders slumped, her head slightly bowed. Michael's breath caught in his throat. Even from this distance, there was something achingly familiar about her build, the way she carried herself. He pushed the thought down, focusing. Next, Silas Blackwood himself alighted from the RV's side door, no longer wearing the fedora. His sharp features were set in a grim line. He helped a small, trembling Lily out of the vehicle. "That's her. That's Lily," Maya whispered urgently, clutching Michael's arm. "And that's definitely Mr. Blackwood." Michael nodded, his gaze fixed on Blackwood. So Mrs. Henderson had been lying through her teeth. Blackwood hadn't been out of town. He'd been right here, orchestrating... what? The acquisition of a new child. His eyes flickered back to the woman. She seemed to be comforting Lily, her hand resting gently on the girl's shoulder, but her own face was a mask of weary resignation. "Okay, Maya," Michael said, his voice low and steady, trying to project a calm he didn't feel. "We need to get closer, try to see what's happening, but we stay hidden, no risks." They crept from the car, using the trees and overgrown bushes for cover, circling around to the side of the house. Michael found a spot where they could peer through a grimy window into what looked like a kitchen. It was dark inside. Suddenly, a twig snapped nearby. Michael froze, pulling Maya behind him. Grizz appeared from around the corner of the house, a shotgun cradled in his arms. His eyes, like a predator's, scanned the tree line. He hadn't seen them. Not yet. Michael held his breath. Grizz spat on the ground, then turned and lumbered back towards the front porch. A close call. Too close. Michael knew they couldn't stay out here. He had to get a message to Harding. He pulled out his phone again. 1 bar. Maybe, just maybe. He quickly typed a text. Blackwood's house. Remote. Hostages Lily, possibly woman. North off coastal, HY. Logging RD approx 5 miles. Sending GPS pin. He prayed it would go through. He hit send, and the progress bar spun. Then, message sent. A wave of relief, however small. "We need a better vantage point," Michael whispered, his mind racing. The element of surprise was gone. He felt a desperate urgency. What if Blackwood decided to move them again? As if summoned by his thoughts, Grizz reappeared, this time with Blackwood. They were talking in low, angry tones, gesturing towards the woods where Michael and Maya were concealed. Had they seen his car, or was it just general paranoia? Before Michael could react, Grizz raised his head, sniffing the air like a bloodhound, then pointed directly at their hiding spot. "There! Someone's out there!" Blackwood barked an order, and Grizz plunged into the undergrowth, shotgun leveled. There was no time to run, no place to hide. Michael stood up, pushing Maya behind him. "We're unarmed. We just want to talk." Grizz burst through the bushes, his face a mask of fury. "Talk? You followed us? Boss ain't gonna like this." He gestured with the shotgun. "Move! Towards the house! Both of you." With a heavy heart, Michael put his hands up, urging Maya to do the same. They were marched across the clearing and onto the porch. Blackwood stood there, arms crossed, his eyes glinting with cold anger. "Well, well," Blackwood said, his voice a low snarl. "Michael Callahan, I presume. And the little runaway, Maya. You've been quite persistent and foolish." "Where's Lily?" Michael demanded, trying to keep the fear out of his voice. "What have you done with her?" Blackwood smirked. "Lily is fine. She's about to become part of my collection, just like someone else, a long time ago." His gaze was chilling. The front door opened, and the woman with the reddish-brown hair stepped out. Her eyes, a startling shade of green-blue, widened in shock as she saw Michael. For a heart-stopping moment, their gazes locked. Michael felt a jolt, a profound sense of recognition that defied logic, that defied 20 years of loss. The shape of her face, the color of her eyes, the way a stray lock of auburn hair fell across her forehead. "Amelia?" The name escaped his lips, a whispered breath of disbelief and dawning, terrifying hope. The woman flinched as if struck. Her face, already pale, lost all color. She looked from Michael to Blackwood, her expression a mixture of terror and confusion. Blackwood let out a harsh laugh. "Amelia? Oh no, Mr. Callahan, there's no Amelia here. This is Alara, my Alara." He put a possessive arm around the woman's shoulders, pulling her tight against him. She visibly trembled but didn't resist. Michael's world fractured. Alara? Number. He knew with a certainty that transcended reason that this was his daughter. Older, weathered by experiences he couldn't imagine, but Amelia nonetheless. The scar, faint but still there, above her left eyebrow. "You're lying," Michael said, his voice shaking. "That's my daughter, Amelia Rose Callahan." Before Blackwood could retort, a distant sound pierced the tense silence. Sirens. Faint at first, then growing louder, closer. Michael's heart leaped. His text had gotten through. Sarah must have called Harding. Help was coming. Blackwood's face contorted in rage. "Grizz, get them inside now." He shoved the woman, Amelia, Alara, whoever she was, towards the door. "You!" he snarled at Michael. "You've made a grave mistake." Grizz prodded Michael and Maya with the shotgun, forcing them into the dimly lit, musty interior of the house. The air was thick with the smell of dust and something else, something vaguely chemical and unsettling. As they were pushed into a large, cluttered living room, Michael's eyes met the woman's again. In their depths, he saw a flicker of something. Recognition? Fear? A silent plea? The sirens were much closer now, accompanied by the crunch of tires on gravel outside. The house was being surrounded. The standoff had begun. The wail of sirens grew to a crescendo, then abruptly ceased, replaced by the slamming of car doors and the authoritative crackle of a megaphone. "Silas Blackwood, this is Detective Harding with the Whisperwind Bluffs Police Department. The house is surrounded. Come out with your hands up. Send out the children and the woman first." Inside, the tension was a palpable entity, coiling in the stale air of the living room. Blackwood paced like a caged animal, his face a mask of fury and trapped desperation. Grizz stood by the front window, shotgun still at the ready, peering through a slit in the grimy curtains. Lily, who had been huddled in a corner, started to cry, a small, terrified sound. The woman, Michael couldn't bring himself to call her Alara, rushed to the child, murmuring soothing words, her own fear evident in her trembling hands. "They can't prove anything," Blackwood muttered, more to himself than anyone else. He grabbed the woman by the arm, his fingers digging into her flesh. "Alara, you listen to me. You go to the door. You tell them you're here willingly. You tell them Lily is our legally adopted daughter. You tell them this man," he jerked his head towards Michael, "is a trespasser, a stalker who's been harassing us. Do you understand?" The woman winced, pulling her arm away. She looked at Blackwood, then at Michael, her eyes wide and haunted. "Silas, Do it!" Blackwood hissed, his face inches from hers. He discreetly slipped a small, snub-nosed pistol from his waistband and pressed it into her hand, closing her fingers around it. For protection, in case he tries anything. His eyes were cold, menacing. It was a clear threat, not a precaution. Detective Harding's voice boomed again. "Blackwood, send out Alara and the children now. We don't want anyone to get hurt." The woman took a deep, shaky breath. She looked at Michael, a flicker of an unreadable emotion in her eyes. Then she turned back to Blackwood, her voice barely a whisper, but firm. I can't do this anymore, Silas." Blackwood stared at her, stunned into momentary silence by her defiance. Then his face contorted with rage. "You're ungrateful." Ignoring him, the woman turned fully towards Michael. Her gaze was intense, searching. You called me Amelia," she said, her voice trembling. Are you really my father?" Tears streamed down Michael's face. He could barely speak past the enormous lump in his throat. "Yes," he choked out. "Yes, I am. Amelia, my little girl." He saw it then, a clear, undeniable recognition dawning in her eyes, chasing away years of confusion and suppression. A ghost of the girl he remembered flickered across her mature, careworn features. "Daddy?" The word was a fragile whisper, a hesitant question mark that hung in the air, laden with 20 years of lost time. Blackwood let out a roar of fury. "She's Alara. She's mine." He lunged, not at Amelia, but at Michael, his eyes blazing with murderous intent. He still had another gun, Michael realized with a sickening lurch, a larger semi-automatic he pulled from under his jacket. Time seemed to slow. Michael saw the glint of the barrel, Blackwood's twisted face, Maya screaming. He braced for the impact. But Amelia moved faster. With a cry that was part rage, part despair, she threw herself at Blackwood, grabbing for the hand that held the gun. The small pistol Blackwood had forced on her was still clutched in her other hand. They grappled, a desperate, violent struggle. 2 shots exploded in the confined space, deafeningly loud. Michael saw Blackwood stagger back, clutching his shoulder, his face a mask of shock and pain. The larger gun clattered to the floor. Amelia stumbled, a dark stain blooming on the sleeve of her blouse, her own small pistol falling from her grasp. "Amelia!" Michael rushed forward, kicking Blackwood's discarded weapon away. The front door burst open, and police officers swarmed in, guns drawn, shouting commands. Detective Harding was at the forefront. "Police! Nobody move! Drop your weapons!" Grizz, seeing the overwhelming odds, dropped his shotgun and raised his hands. Officers quickly subdued him. Others rushed to Blackwood, who had collapsed against a wall, groaning. Paramedics, who had been staged nearby, were already entering. Michael reached Amelia, gently taking her arm. The wound looked like a graze, bleeding but not life-threatening. "Are you okay?" "My God, Amelia." She looked up at him, her eyes filled with a whirlwind of emotions, relief, pain, disbelief. "Daddy?" she said again, this time with more certainty, the sound like a balm to his soul. She was alive, his daughter was alive, and she had saved him. Maya ran to Lily, and the 2 sisters embraced, sobbing with relief. Detective Harding surveyed the scene, Blackwood wounded, Grizz in cuffs, Amelia holding her injured arm, Michael at her side, the 2 young girls safe. "It's over, Mr. Callahan," Harding said, his voice gentle but weary. "It's finally over." Michael looked at his daughter, his Amelia, found after 2 decades, lost in the darkness. Over? No, he thought. It was just beginning. The long road to healing, to understanding, to reclaiming what had been stolen, was only just starting. But for the first time in 20 years, Michael Callahan felt a profound, unshakable hope. Amelia was home. The emergency room at Whisperwind Bluffs General Hospital was a sterile, brightly lit space that felt a world away from the dark, oppressive atmosphere of Blackwood's remote house. Amelia's arm had been cleaned and bandaged. The bullet had only grazed her, a superficial wound that was more shocking than serious. Silas Blackwood was in surgery, under police guard, for the gunshot wound to his shoulder, the bullet from his own gun, deflected during the struggle, or perhaps from Amelia's small pistol, fired in sheer panic and self-preservation. The exact ballistics would be determined later. Grizz was already in a holding cell at the station. Child Protective Services had been called for Maya and Lily. Maya, fiercely protective, refused to leave Lily's side. Michael assured them he would do everything he could to help, a promise he fully intended to keep. Sarah arrived in a flurry of anxiety and relief, Detective Harding having called her as soon as the situation was secure. She rushed to Amelia, her face a torrent of tears and incredulous joy. "Amelia? Oh, my baby, is it really you?" Amelia, still dazed, looked from Michael to Sarah. "Mom?" she whispered, and the years melted away as Sarah enveloped her in a fierce hug, sobbing her name over and over. The reunion was a raw, emotional deluge. 20 years of unspoken words, of unimaginable experiences, hung in the air, but for now, the sheer miracle of their being together again eclipsed everything. Michael watched them, his own heart overflowing. He had his family back, shattered, scarred, but together. "My name," Amelia said, her voice gaining strength as she looked at her parents, truly seeing them, "is Amelia Grace Callahan, not Alara, never Alara." Later, in a quiet hospital room, after the initial shock had subsided into a weary calm, Amelia began to tell her story. It came out in fragments, disjointed and painful, like piecing together a shattered mirror. She remembered the roller skates, the sunny day. A friendly man in a trucking rig had stopped, asking for directions. Silas Blackwood. He'd been younger then, but his eyes, she recalled, were just as cold. He'd offered her a soda, and then darkness. She'd woken up in a small, hidden compartment in his truck, terrified and alone. He'd driven for days, moving her from one dingy motel or secluded hiding spot to another. He told her there had been a terrible accident, that her parents were dead. She was only 12. She believed him. He was all she had. For years, she was his prisoner, his secret. He moved frequently, always one step ahead of anyone who might ask questions. "He called me his treasure," Amelia said, a shudder running through her. "He kept me hidden like one of his collectibles. The skates, he'd kept them too, a trophy from his first prize. He'd even shown them to her occasionally, a cruel reminder of the life he'd stolen. When she turned 18, he'd started introducing her as Ilara, his young wife. The psychological manipulation had been relentless. He'd isolated her, controlled her every move, eroding her sense of self until the memories of Amelia Callahan felt like a distant, half-forgotten dream. She'd had no access to news, no way to know her parents were alive and searching. The collector's nook, she explained, was more than just an antique shop. It was a front for Blackwood's less savory activities, fencing stolen goods he acquired during his earlier trucking days and through a network of shady contacts. He was a master manipulator, charming when he needed to be, ruthless when crossed. "Lily," Amelia's voice broke. "He decided I was getting old. He wanted someone younger. He found Lily at the St. Agnes home. He told me she was to be the new Alara, that I was to help, train her." The horror of it was etched on her face. "I couldn't let him do to her what he did to me. When I saw Maya, and then you, Daddy, at the house, something snapped. I knew I couldn't protect her and stay silent anymore. The small gun Blackwood had given her, she'd hidden it, thinking she might need it to protect Lily or herself. She hadn't anticipated needing it to protect her father. Detective Harding joined them later, his expression grim. "Blackwood is stable, but he's facing a litany of charges: kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, child endangerment, illegal firearms possession, and attempted murder for starters. Grizz is cooperating, spilling everything about Blackwood's operations. It seems Blackwood had a network. We're already rounding up his known associates. This goes deeper than just your daughter, Mr. Callahan, though her case is the cornerstone." Maya and Lily, accompanied by a social worker, came to see Amelia. The bond between the sisters was palpable. Lily, though still timid, clung to Maya. Michael looked at these two brave girls, their lives irrevocably altered by Blackwood's evil. "We'll help you," he told them, meeting Sarah's supportive gaze. "Financially, emotionally, whatever you need. You won't be alone." As dawn approached, painting the sky outside the hospital window with soft hues of pink and gold, the Callahans sat together, exhausted, emotionally drained, but united. "You know," Michael said, his voice thick with emotion, looking at Sarah, "if you hadn't insisted on this trip to Whisperwind Bluffs—" Sarah smiled through her tears. "And if you hadn't spotted those skates, and if brave little Maya hadn't found you." It was a chain of impossibilities, of serendipitous moments and courageous actions that had led them back to each other. The road ahead would be long and arduous. There were 20 years of trauma to unpack, of lost time that could never be fully reclaimed. But as Michael looked at his wife and his daughter, his strong, resilient Amelia, he knew they would face it together. He no longer needed to make wishes on shooting stars or whisper pleas into the uncaring night. His miracle had already happened. Amelia was home. The echoes of loss were finally beginning to fade, replaced by the tentative, hopeful melody of a new beginning.